and welcome to CreativeLive. This is Photo Week 2015. It is the largest photography online conference of the year. My name is Kenna Klosterman, and I am your host, and we're thrilled to have 4 leading industry experts to talk about the state of the photography industry. So I'm thrilled to have with us here Chris Robinson, who is the former editor of Outdoor Photographer magazine for 19 years, Barnaby Britton, who is an editor at DPReview. We have Jaron Schneider, who, if any of you were watching our West Coast bus tour, had joined us. Jaron is from Resource Magazine. And we have Jirsa, who just finished up his class here on CreativeLive's Photo Week, who is one of the founding partners of SLR Lounge. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really, really great to have you. Now, this is really the time of year where a lot of new announcements are made, new technologies are coming out left and right, and we just wanted to invite you all here to talk a little bit about new products, new technologies, things like 4K, drones. You're hearing a lot about that manufacturer who may have been in a back seat might be taking a leap forward. So will mirrorless be replacing the DSLR? So lots here to talk about. So we're going to go ahead and just get started. So once again, welcome. The first thing that we wanted to talk about was about new products, new technologies, and talking a little bit about something that you're excited about or something that you see is moving the industry forward. So why don't we just start with you, Pi?
All right, so let me think here. Let me think, but I actually have it written down. Just did that for you. Okay. So one of the things that I thought was it's just kind of crazy the rate of, the pace that technology is taking in terms of the change in sensor technology. What sensors are doing these days in terms of the dynamic range that they can capture, in terms of ISO sensitivity, and doing it in like smaller and smaller form factors. Mm-hmm. It kind of leads into the next point that I would talk about later on, but it's basically democratizing production. Like, it gives everybody the tools to create professional images, and in ways that are so simple and affordable. So I think that's my thing, sensor technology.
Sensor technology. Well, I think you had a little bit to build on that.
Yeah, I agree with Pi entirely. Yeah, agreement.
We're bros.
It's going on specifically about sensors. I'm like, a couple years ago, I was kind of scoffing specifically at Sony because the cameras that I was seeing out of them were like either ridiculous or something about them didn't make sense, or many somethings about them didn't make sense when you picked one up and shot with it. And in the last 2 years, I went from being someone who would never think of ever owning a Sony camera to like wanting to buy at least 3. And I think it's been really smart what they've done. And they kept saying in like their annual reports or whatever, we're going to keep investing in imaging. And I didn't understand what that meant because I wasn't seeing it yet. But that meant for them like building sensors for everybody except Canon and Fuji, I think. They make and a couple others. But the main guys all are using Sony sensors. And now they're all sort of relying on Sony for that. And now Sony is releasing stuff before they give it to someone like Nikon. And that to me is a big deal. And I think that's really cool for Sony to be pushing the envelope the way that they have with both megapixels and sensitivity.
Yeah, 14 stops and 40 megapixels, nearly 40 megapixels in these tiny little
camera
bodies.
It's crazy. And it's just awesome that we can have stuff like that. And then on sensors as well, like the new iPhone's ridiculous too. Like,
I love my iPhone.
And the new one's going to be like the one that comes out on Friday, I think, is even better than what we currently have. So.
Are you getting the new one? Or are you using
It's
what
a
you
good
have
question.
Now? What do you have now?
My one that I had just died. I had the 6 Plus,
okay.
And it just died and it just got replaced. So I'm like, I think I'll just hold on to it. But I'm also of the boat of like, there's so much amazing technology coming out at any point in time that I feel like it's very easy for us to get gear acquisition syndrome.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about? Gas.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
Now
Got
you
gas?
I've got gas.
So like we get into these phases where like we just constantly want to upgrade and upgrade and upgrade, and like I kind of find myself just honing it back a little bit and just kind of saying to myself, look, like photographers were using, they were doing what they're creating amazing images with literally nothing compared to what we have today for decades. And so I find myself kind of saying like, just because the latest and greatest thing comes out doesn't necessarily mean I need to go out and buy it. So I'm kind of trying to
Absolutely.
rein it in a little bit.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Sony, because the A7 IIR seems like a lot of professionals are taking that on, which does seem a very new thing. Do you think that's something that the mass sort of consumer market will understand, that Sony is somewhere to go? Or do you think it's going to start sort of top down?
You want to go?
Well, I mean, Sony's dominance of the large sensor market is really quite incredible. And actually, just a minor correction, Sony does supply sensors to Canon. It does supply sensors to Fujifilm. The basis of the X-Trans sensor is also Sony. So I think a lot of people might, I don't want to turn this into a Sony fest necessarily, but a lot of people already use Sony sensors and don't even realize.
Right.
And what happens in the professional end of the market does tend to trickle down. Very often, things like the requirement for faster, more accurate focusing and operational speed, all of that trickles down as processing power becomes cheaper into lower-end cameras.
Yeah.
That was like the Canon strategy. I mean, that's why the Rebel is so popular. It's because everyone has like they want the 5D3, but then they'll go get the Rebel because that's a little more affordable and more approachable.
And part of it is marketing. Part of it is simply that technology becomes more cheaper, as time goes on. So when a certain amount of processing power cost you a certain amount 5 years ago, it costs a fraction of that now. So enthusiasts now can have professional level performance.
I want your accent, Bernie.
Do you?
I feel like everything I say would be more meaningful with your accent.
I'm rather bored of it.
But you're totally spot on. Like you look at like what professionals were using 20 years ago, and I don't think it's comparative to even like a $500 DSLR today. So it's crazy how it
I mean,
trickles down.
talking of the new iPhone, just not a little bit of a tangent, but 4K video in your pocket, I know Android's had that for a while. Calm down.
And the sensors have become so very good, and it's the rest of the cameras and all the ancillary accessories and lenses have all, really stepped up. and Sony really has done some extraordinary things with these newer sensors and actually building cameras around them that are more and more capable. I know we've all heard stories of professional photographers who have traded in, Canon or Nikon and gone to a Sony A7 system. And it's because the image quality is just so good, and the rest of the package, the rest of the system is now keeping up.
One of the tricks that Sony, again, not a Sony advert, but one of the tricks that Sony's pulled off in the A7R II is third-party autofocus support.
Okay.
So almost
That's
a sort of
huge.
an accident of design. If you use, for now, I believe only Canon, but if you use a Canon EF lens on a Sony A7R II with a certain kind of adapter, it'll actually autofocus using phase detection autofocus, so it's not wobbling, it's not hunting, it's actually pretty much, depending on the lens, it's up there with your expectations of that glass on a native Canon body. So straight away, there is no pain point at all, aside from spending $3,000 on the camera. there is really no energy barrier to actually shifting systems with regards to AF. Sony want you to buy Sony lenses, but you can, if you need to, continue to use a Canon glass for however long.
I feel like that's going to be a huge reason why people would actually shift, because it seems like so many people stay true to a particular brand because of their lenses, not the body. And
Metabones helped too. Metabones was huge in this, and now that their actual thing will do autofocus too, just about every single one of their adapters now autofocuses pretty darn reliably.
So I'm not familiar with Metabones. Tell us
so
more.
there are these little adapters you can get. I use a Panasonic GH4 for a lot of my filmmaking, and it allows me to use all of my old EF glass directly onto it, and it actually makes the field of view slightly wider and makes it slightly faster. So my 1.4 lens becomes a 1.2 lens. And so in most cases, that's much better. And if it's, the only problem is it kind of shifts everything down. So I can't stop down in super bright light, so I just get a filter for that and a defilter.
It's an adapter, but some of them, like the one we just mentioned, have a condensing lens in, effectively. So you no longer have to deal with horrible field of view crops if you put them on Micro Four Thirds or APS-C. It's clever stuff.
Cool company.
So what are some of the other new big, technology things or products that we're excited about? Brittany?
Brittany?
Well,
that's a new one. This is related to Sony. Again, not a Sony advert. I think just talking about, we talk a lot about mirrorless, and almost we now, it's a credit to people like Sony and indeed Samsung that when we talk about mirrorless, that's really who we mean now. But there are some things that mirrorless as an agglomeration of technologies allows you to do, which are actually having a really significant impact upon photographers, even if they don't necessarily realize. So as pixel counts have increased over the past few years, two serious problems with DSLRs have emerged, which have always been there, but not really been fully necessarily recognized by enthusiasts or beginners. One is autofocus accuracy, which honestly above 24 megapixels can just be a crapshoot. And the other is shutter and or mirror induced vibration, which at very high resolutions like 24, 36, and above, can have a serious impact on resolution because it just shakes the picture. And actually, if you're shooting test charts like we do at DPReview all the time, nailing that down, almost literally, actually in the studio, we have to weight the tripods down and put them on special surfaces and everything else to dampen the vibration from a shutter. Wow. Whereas mirrorless cameras obfuscate that entire issue. You can have fully electronic, first-person electronic capture. There's no mirror flapping around. And because the focusing is done on the sensor, you don't have to have a second focusing sensor with its own set of tolerances and everything else. So you don't have the AF inaccuracy issues. You don't have to micro-adjust your lenses. Didn't really matter 10 years ago, but it's hugely important now. And anyone who shoots Canon, the 5DS, 5DSR, brilliant cameras, but you've got to focus them like medium format cameras. You really, really do. And the Nikon D800 and D810 are the same. Whereas the A7R, not a problem. It's all done on the sensor.
So what do other people think about that notion of the mirrorless cameras taking over DSLRs?
I thought you were going to talk.
I was thinking.
Oh, can I talk?
Is
Yes,
it possible? Will it?
absolutely.
Yeah,
All right,
go for it.
A while ago, I was all about the crowd who was never going to go mirrorless. Like, I was a huge Canon DSLR guy, and it was because the sensor focusing you were talking about was so wildly inaccurate, and the hunting and the missing was just too much for me. Over the years, they've gotten a lot better at it. I like Samsung. They do a really good job with it. So I'm not going to make this into a Sony advert anymore. Samsung does an excellent job with on-sensor.
Not to hijack, but Samsung deserves a huge amount of credit for a lot of the technological developments of the last couple of years.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think now I'm totally on with ditching that mirror because it's kind of just holding us back now.
Yeah.
I agree completely. It's a couple years ago, you would have, contrast detect AF systems, and you'd have these companies that would come out and say, we have the fastest AF system, and sure enough, from infinity to close focus, that thing would go as fast as any other AF system it was. It wouldn't find anything on the way, but it would go there. And in low light, in all sorts of conditions, these on-focus, or rather on-sensor AF systems are just becoming so good, and it really is going to be the thing, I think, that finally does put the knife in the back of the mirror.
But also on sensor phase detection AF systems. There's a crucial difference there, not just being speed of acquisition, but there's no hunting.
Yeah.
It's essentially a simulacrum almost of what the DSLR is doing with a dedicated sensor. It knows how far, it knows something is out of focus because it's too far away versus how out of focus it is because it's too close. So it can drive a lens straight there. So normally if anyone has used the first generation mirrorless cameras, sort of 2008, 9, 10, they hunt a lot, they wobble. They're very quick if you want them to go straight to somewhere, but you can see right at the end, they go back, forth, they wobble. Whereas phase detection systems, given enough light, don't need to do that. So the advent of phase detection systems on sensor is amazing. And Nikon actually deserves credit for being the first people, as far as I can recall, the first manufacturer to get there. But it makes a huge difference.
It makes a lot of sense. No, I was going to say on the mirrorless point that the crazy part is that it's only been a few years, like since mirrorless was introduced and the way that it's come in. When I first got, I think the first mirrorless that I used was a Panasonic, and then it was a Sony, and I could still see like where the DSLR was needed, like it's necessary for my work. And even now, there's still like certain comforts that I like. Like I still love the way that just the DSLR screen interprets an image, especially when you're doing flash and you're doing a lot of like things with adding light and so forth. A lot of times the live previews and sensors don't have, like on the mirrorless cameras, the graduation of color isn't as detailed. And so like I'll look at an image and I'll be like, do I have detail there? Is it blown out or what is it? I can't tell. So there's still certain things, but like every one of these benefits of a DSLR like have just been whittled away. And it totally makes sense in a few years why it would take over, because it's a simpler system in terms of like mechanically, you don't have as many things that are going to go wrong and so forth. But by the way, if you have your mirrorless, the first mistake I made was I had hot swap lenses all the time on my DSLR, and I used to do it on my mirrorless when I first got one with it on. And the sensor's on, so it attracts dust. So like, I got my mirrorless, and then 30 minutes later, I was like, why are there dust spots everywhere in my photo? Because I was...
Pro tip, turn the camera off.
Turn the camera off. Do what they recommend.
Body caps, man, body caps.
Well, I just recently saw that there are certain drones right now that can actually take full mirrorless cameras up with them. And I wanted to move on to that topic of the new drone technology and what's coming with that.
Yeah, well, drones is something that I wanted to talk about because I'm incredibly excited about what's happening in the drone business. I mean, drones have been revolutionary in the past few years, we all know. But we're kind of entering the next phase of aerial photography with a drone, which is now you don't have to be an accomplished pilot necessarily. Now, I'm saying everyone shouldn't practice and become better at flying these things because they are essentially, a flying lawnmower.
Flying death machines.
But we're developing systems now that are more and more making the pilot skill less and less important, and the drone itself is becoming more of a photography platform, so that you without a whole lot of practice, without a whole lot of skill, you can create really interesting images and really interesting video. I'm particularly excited about it because I'm a terrible, terrible pilot, and I've tried to be good. I've built my own drones, partially because I keep crashing them, and kind of the new developments that are happening here are really, I think, going to change photography. And I'm talking about sort of on the aesthetic side. We talked a lot about the technical side and getting deep into pixels in this panel. I'm really excited about what's happening on the aesthetic side because this is going to create a whole new way of seeing the landscape. I came from outdoor photographer where, just getting out, being able to trek to some far off places was a really difficult thing to do. A drone, now I'm not talking about so much as, for creating fine art imagery, but as a scouting tool is also an incredibly powerful tool. So I'm really excited about what's happening in the drone business right now.
The crazy thing about drones is, you can imagine so all these tools are becoming so insanely affordable. And we were talking about it just before the panel that, legislation is going to come into play and it's going to have a major impact. And I agree that I don't think that legislation is going to kind of say that nobody can use drones. But at the same time, if you imagine if this many people have drones now, and in 10 years from now, let's say you can pick up a 4K drone for $250, everybody's going to have these things. And there has to be some rule in play for when there's 200 of these flying up above your neighborhood, and there's kids around and they're just crashing everywhere. And so it'll be interesting where that industry grows from a legislative perspective.
Yeah. We'll really see how that plays out because that's happening right now. There's been the notice of recommendations that were issued earlier this year, and we're expecting some final rulings maybe later this year, maybe next year. And it is possible, it's conceivable that drones will be shut out of, say, the U.S. market. I don't think they'll be shut out worldwide. And I wrote a blog post actually on this some time ago. And one of the things I really concluded was just common sense. If everyone would just apply a little bit of common sense.
Asking a lot.
Yeah. It is. It's asking a lot, but don't fly the drone into the White House. Don't fly the drone into the schoolyard when kids are at recess.
What is it that people should be looking for in the future? What are some of the other directions that the industry is going?
Talking about the drone industry, or
just
the photography industry?
Yeah, photography industry.
When I was asked this question before the panel, and I stand by my answer, I have no idea. In the years that I was with the Werner titles, Outdoor Photographer, Digital Photo Pro especially, I was constantly surprised by, new technology would come out and someone would be using it in a way that I hadn't thought of, that, and I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but there's always a new way of looking at things, and technology feeds the aesthetic then feeds a need for new technology, and so on and so on.
It's like a Hegelian dialectic.
It is like the Hegelian dialectic.
And
This
for
is an
people
inside
at
joke.
home that don't know what the Hegelian dialectic is,
I don't know what it is either.
Change
I
is
didn't
the
know.
only only real constant.
I
And
think everybody knows that, right?
That's easier to understand.
Yeah.
I still don't get it. Okay, never mind. I'm lost.
That's all right. That's all right. I think I'm curious what you mean exactly by, though, that aesthetic is changing and therefore the technology is changing.
I think about the early days of photography when we moved from glass plates to film, and film was orthochromatic, and you'd have these big blown out skies, and everyone was more people could shoot photos But you had this problem with these black and white images where the skies were really, really white. So then the manufacturers got involved and they said, okay, let's develop films, let's make them better so that we don't have these blown out skies. And so then you have people that say, oh, now I have a new material to work with. I can create a different kind of image with it.
Yeah.
And we keep going forward this way.
But as you said, it also works the opposite way around. I mean, no one would have thought. I've seen some drone footage, which I think, in my opinion, drone footage is genuinely a new aesthetic. And it's only possible because of the technology. And as soon as you give people a tool, they'll use it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Even smartphone cameras, the ability to have a camera in a device that small, that portable, that a child can use. Images have been taken that could never possibly have been taken on anything other than smartphones, which is wonderful.
And not just the stills also, but from a film perspective as well on those devices.
Feature films have been shot on smartphones now, and
Yeah.
it's honestly some of the stuff I've seen, I wouldn't know it.
And I don't think it matters.
No.
I think that's beautiful about it.
And I think a lot of that started as a gimmick, but now it's genuinely, okay, well, wait a minute, I can actually use this tool in a very close environment. I can be shooting you very up close like this, and I'm creating a different look, creating a different kind of a scene that I couldn't do before.
You change your engagement with the subject,
Yeah.
which is actually one of the #1 barriers to any kind of successful photography, documentary photography especially. The more you can break down or ideally remove that barrier of trust or of intimidation, the better your images will be. It's genuinely revolutionary, and it's not. A lot of us here, professionally, faced with this challenge of the smartphone industry is actually, destroying the low end of the camera market.
Absolutely.
But it's really hard to be too dismissive of them. They are fantastic pieces of technology.
As a segue on this, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was that because iPhone photography and any smartphone photography at all is so easily accessible, it's actually not taking just the bottom out of the actual camera market, it's taking the bottom out of picture market. It's very easy for you to have your photos undervalued. I had a client who actually said this to me, that he was able to get this shot. He wanted a shot of like a train wheel in San Francisco, like one of the trains. He's like, I just got it on my iPhone. You can do that, right? Just get it at a higher resolution. And it's like, I mean, the permits and the, But I also know folks who have heard someone say, why would I pay you $5,000 to take these pictures when I feel like I could take them myself? So the fact that these are so easily accessible and usable, it's taking away the fact that what we do is more complicated than that. And it's hard to convince people of that when suddenly the camera is doing everything.
Yeah.
That is true. I think that it's fair to say the bottom has been falling out of that market for a while, though. I mean, I signed up to I shot for a picture agency for a long time in the UK, and I signed up in 2005, and already the writing was on the wall then, and that was a year and a half before the iPhone. I think actually the internet is another part of that as well. It's probably it's reasonable to blame the smartphone to a degree, but just the speed with which images can be disseminated and the low quality that the minimum now represents in terms of resolution, not aesthetics. That took the bottom out of the market.
And stock photography too is also really hurting like custom-made images. Like it's not uncommon to see someone pay at most $800 to $1,000 for something that years ago, and they kind of wanted it as custom as possible while still being stock. Years ago would have cost a lot more than that, and to actually produce something good would still cost a lot more than that, but they don't want to pay anymore because they've been so used to paying stock market prices, stock photography market prices.
I still have a contract with the Big Picture Library, and now my average sale is less than a cent.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
On images taken along, admittedly, a while ago, but it's because the market has changed to a increasingly subscription model.
Yeah.
Big media companies just pay a subscription fee per year, so everyone does brilliantly well, except for the photographer who shot the image in the first place.
If you take so let's say I'm someone and I buy that subscription, I can download maybe 50,000 images a month or something like that. If I have a subscription and I buy his image, he makes at most 3 cents. If I don't
pay tax on that.
Yeah. If I don't have a subscription, you make $3.
Yeah.
So the amount that he could make is wildly fluctuates, and the only person, like you said, who benefits are the stock people, the actual company that sells the product.
It's a very good business to be in, as long as you're not
As long as
the
you're not
content
the-
creator.
Yeah, exactly.
These are struggles that the industry's been facing for decades, though. I mean, the smartphone didn't create this, and it's been going on. Camcorders, when they first came out, they undermined a lot of filmmakers. People that were making, I'm talking about industrial films and wedding videos and things like that, because suddenly someone could say, I can go to the Circuit City at the time and buy a camcorder for $1,000, and I can be shooting this just as well as you can. Well, of course, they couldn't, but that's because photography and filmmaking has a certain amount of, I can buy into it. The prerequisite for being a photographer is owning a camera. And it's a struggle that the industry faces and will continue to face. But it's why I think it's so important that new photographers now, go to business school, take business classes, learn how to manage your business, because otherwise you're just going to get swept up in this, and what you're making today is guaranteed on the same kind of work to be less tomorrow. So you got to find a way to adapt, and you got to run yourself like a business.
You have to value your own work.
That's a problem. Pricing for some people, they don't realize how much money they're leaving on the table. I had a friend who was bidding on a very large commercial job, and he bid, I think it was $65,000 for it, which is really fair for what they were asking. It was like for boats, and the person he lost to bid $15,000. So even if he had just come up to 40, he still would have won. But look how much money he left on the table.
But the thing is that, so what we're talking about right now is basically that point that I wanted to make with the democratization, that's a long word, I don't like big words. The democratization of production. Yes, Hegelian dialect. Well, you'll explain that to me later.
We'll tell you.
I need to figure that out. So, but basically the point is that it isn't anything new. It happens across every single industry. I mean, look at when cars were, first released to the public. How many people could afford cars versus today, what you can buy for $10,000, whatever it is. Every one of these industries is always going to go through this phase of just democratization, where the tools of making these pieces of art, music, films, whatever it is, are going to become wildly available to anybody who has $100. And it's only going to get worse. And if that's what you're relying on is the gear to make yourself a professional photographer, then that is exactly why you're going to fail. So I kind of feel like it doesn't matter. Like, democratization is a great thing. It makes tools readily available, and it's no longer a question of like having the right tool. It's choosing the right tool. Right. It's now we have a smartphone that can go anywhere. It can get us these close-up angles on a film that they weren't possible 10 years ago. Yet we can get that. So for an experienced filmmaker, that's fantastic, because it gives them all these new perspectives and things that they couldn't do before. And what's going to happen is that differentiation for the professional photographer is no longer going to be about your gear. It's going to be about the experience that you're delivering, whether it's an experience to a client, whether it's the storytelling component of your final feature film. And believe me, it is so easy to tell who can deliver a good experience and a great product versus the average. The only difference is the average is the bar is just getting raised a little bit higher each year.
There are plenty of bad photographers walking around with really good cameras, so we can still sleep safely in our beds at night, I think.
Yeah, and despite sensors being able to pick up 14, I mean, our eyes do 20 plus stops of light.
Couldn't tell.
Eventually, I'm sure sensors are going to get there too. But being able to interact with somebody, being able to pose them, being able to light them, to be able to put light into a scene, be able to create something of value, that's something that a camera is never going to be able to do. And that's where those that can do that are going to really excel, and those that understand business and so forth.
I'd like to actually mention lighting. Sorry.
No, go.
Because lighting is becoming sort of the lost art of photography, and it's crazy because it's at the core of photography. With cameras, we talked about sensors earlier and ISO ranges and everything else, and what's happening there. There's this disconnect for a lot of people that, I don't need light anymore. Well, you certainly do. Because light isn't about how much wattage you're throwing, it's about balance. And whether you can play with your ISO range or what, you've actually got to understand how to balance the light that's in your scene. Whether you're doing it with a candle, a match, a flashlight, a big 10K, you've still got to balance it.
That's actually all this talk of mirrorless. If I reach for a camera, I tend to reach for a DSLR. One of the reasons I still do actually is light, is because it's the optical light path. So I'm seeing the color temperature. If it's candlelight, I'm seeing candle-colored light. I'm not seeing the camera's attempt to neutralize it through an electronic finder. And actually, that's what keeps a lot of people still using DSLRs.
I would agree with that.
Do you think that there'll be a lot of new gadgets or what have you created then for things like the iPhone, to bring people back to thinking about light? Or
I certainly hope so. certainly there's no shortage of gadgets being created for the iPhone.
Sure.
And it's a great thing about iPhones and smartphones with cameras in general is just that it's creating this whole new path of technology and people thinking about how to make a better photograph. So I'd hope so. I would say that with lighting, I'm sort of skeptical because it really does seem to be this one aspect of photography that people don't want to learn. It feels too much like learning. You have to learn how to light. Like you got to spend time and figure it out. And I think that's really creating a certain hindrance, whereas the iPhone in general seems to be really pick it up, shoot pictures, throw on this quick accessory and shoot, a wider angle picture, whatever it's going to be. So I hope so. I'm not really optimistic about lighting for camera phones.
Well, is that then the thing that can differentiate people? The ability to understand lighting techniques and how to go about using those
Could
things?
be, and camera supports too. I mean, tripods aren't sexy, lighting isn't sexy, but actually, unless you really know what you're doing with them, you are limited, and that is a barrier to entry.
Yep.
Right? I mean, no one wants to go out and spend $2,000 or $3,000 on camera supports and rigs and clamps and everything else. But there are some things that you can't do unless you do that. Whereas buying a new camera, buying a new lens, that's fun. That's nice.
A lot of us, I think in our heads, if we're watching television and we see a really bad local commercial, that's because there was a level of good enough that they were willing to settle for. And that level of good enough is what we're fighting against. So even though we can make something truly more beautiful, are they willing to care enough? I think as clients, do they care as much as we care? And I can't answer that question. I want them to. I want them to care as much as we care.
See, I feel like we always talk about how easy it is to get into the industry, and we keep kind of comparing that average and stuff. And I feel like if you set the bar so high for yourself and for your studio that there is no comparison. Like you're up here, you're down here. Like everybody, I mean, how many of us, the iPhone, inexpensive phones, these are like cars, right? We all have an iPhone, we all have cars, we all drive from place to place. But I don't think any of you guys would say that you're a race car driver. Probably not, but yet we all are pretty intimately familiar with a car and how it would work and so forth. But the level of difference between a performance driver versus just one of us is so vastly different that there's no comparison to be made. And I think the danger that we fall into is not realizing that our images are too close to that average, and that's the problem. Like the images that we're creating are so close to the average that if someone cannot distinguish it, that's an issue. And that's where it's really going into differentiation, because like posing and lighting and all those kind of things that, frankly, they're not the sexy part of. When you go buy a car, you don't go, am I going to have to fix this car myself? Like that's not, you want a car that just works and it takes you from point A to point B. And I think that's the majority of people that buy a camera. It just works. It takes pictures. And so to compare yourself there is really shortchanging yourself, because there's such a vast amount of in-between that can be gained, and it's gained through education. And that kind of brings me to my last thing, which is that more than any piece of technology that you could possibly purchase, the most effective tool for a successful photographer is your education. Like, that's it, bottom line. We did a professional shoot, I know F-Stoppers did this too, when you were back with them a while back. We did a professional shoot with an iPhone. We published it. And then we told people after the fact that it was done with an iPhone. And it was after the F-Stoppers did theirs. And people had no idea that it could be done with an iPhone, but it can. So I feel like people are focused in the wrong areas of where they're putting their time, where they're putting their money, and they'd be much better off putting it towards educating and practicing.
So what do you think are in terms of education, you talked about business, Chris, because I know we talk about that a lot here on CreativeLive, that a lot of people maybe get into photography because it's their passion and what have you, but then realize quickly that it's maybe 10% photography and 90% business. And they don't necessarily teach you business in art school, in photography school. What are some of the other areas that you think you're seeing people not getting educated in?
Oh.
I don't know, any of you. I was like, you're like, are you talking to me?
You again, hi.
You're so beautiful, Ken. Sorry, say the question.
What are some of the other areas that you see people are not getting educated in, and therefore sort of not being able to compete or be at a level that other folks are?
I really think what Chris said, like lighting is a lost art form, and so is posing. So is like the most basic thing of just learning how to be a human being and talk to somebody. Like we are It's crazy. Like we spend our entire lives on the internet and talking on the internet and showing pictures on the internet that when I see someone in person, you're like, how do I show them and talk to them things without this being awkward? And it's like, just be yourself. Like just learn how to communicate. And those things are it's difficult to teach. Like how do you teach a course on, I'm going to teach you to have charisma. There's actually really good books on. Have you heard the Charisma Myth? It's a really good book.
I've not heard the Charisma Myth. Have you?
The Charisma Myth is a fantastic book.
No.
If you guys want to learn how to have charisma, good book. Okay, enough of that. So
You have charisma, Pi. You've got
lighting,
it. Tell us.
lighting is fantastic. Posing is fantastic. Giving a client a good experience. The funny thing about it is that it has very little to do with photography. Of course, if the images are not good, that's a big issue. But most clients, if they can't tell the difference between 90% and 100%, the only thing that they can tell is how did you make them feel?
Yep.
You know, how was their experience? Was it easy? Was it fun? Did they enjoy that? Most of my guys, I put a big focus when I go out with a couple. I put a big focus on the guy, making sure that the guy's having a good time. Because I feel like girls in general, raise your hand. I know you're with me. I'm not a girl, but my wife would disagree with that sometimes. So girls in general, they like taking photos. I know that guys really don't. So when I go out in a couple session, I put focus on making sure the guy's having a good time. And if he's having a good time, she automatically loosens up and she has a good time. And the first thing that the guy says to me is, this is so much easier than I thought it'd be. And those kind of things are things that technology will never even touch. And so when someone comes into our studio, we go, are you a professional photographer? They go, yes, I have a 5D Mark III. And I go, great, let me show you how to use it. And let me show you how to be a photographer that can work in the studio. And that has, most people that come into our studio, they know we have 40 photographers. We do over nearly 1,000 client commissions a year. And it's a multi-million-dollar business. And it has 10% of that foundation is, can you take a good photo? And the 90% is, can you take care of your clients? And so that is, and that falls into lighting, and it falls into posing, and it falls into everything.
Sure. I mean, that's, again, that's what people remember, to your point.
I don't think there's enough emphasis, and I think that there's a reason there's not a lot of emphasis put on this, because there's a lot of money, and what I'm going to say is not the right thing. If you go to any of the trade shows, if you go to WPPI or PPE, and you see these big crowds of people around like 3 specific booths, it would be Canon, Nikon, and Sony. And those crowds of people, I think there's a mentality in a lot of them, which is, if I listen to this person and buy what they're using, I am just like that much closer to actually being that person on that stage talking to people. And I don't really think, and by not saying don't really, I absolutely don't think that's where you should be aiming as a photographer. You should be aiming to do what you love doing, which should be taking pictures. If your only goal is to be that celebrity on stage, you'll
never get there.
Right, and I see it all the time, and I had a conversation with a friend of mine, Melissa knew about this, and it was really weird for me to see that happening, because it was never a goal of mine to be sitting here talking about this sort of thing. It just happened because I'm doing something I love.
You're passionate.
The other
Yeah.
guy couldn't make it. So.
Right. Thanks, Barney.
Brittany.
Brittany, right?
All right.
Yeah, right.
So like, just don't focus on stage. Don't focus on being that person that you idolize. Focus on being you, like you were saying earlier. Just be you.
It's tough because like you get, it's a really strange thing about our industry where you get like all these people that go up and they speak and they talk about it and they personify this rock star lifestyle of a photographer, and it does not exist.
It's not real.
It's not real, and it's something that people are looking for that doesn't, it's not present. And so like, it's always like, you know, we try and just focus, like try and focus on just your understanding your craft and being passionate about what you're doing, because it takes, there's a study that it takes about 10,000 hours in any field before you can actually add a contribution to that field. So 10,000 hours. So are you passionate enough about photography to spend 10,000 hours to get there? And if what you're looking at is the lifestyle that these people have, I can tell you that you're never gonna get there, because it's not enough. And by the way, that's, if you're working 40 hours a week, that's 5 years. So 5 years of 40 hours a week before you can make a contribution to whatever industry that you're in.
And there's a downside to that, which of course, that's the Malcolm Gladwell thing, I think, isn't it? 10,000
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
When you get to the point where you have put that time in, that might be the point where you stop making mistakes and you stop experimenting. And there are plenty of photographers out there who've stopped being creative because they got too good at it. To return slightly to the original point, the biggest skills deficit that I see as an editor is actually post, because that's something that you never had to worry about with film. You know, if someone messed your film up, they messed your film up. Whereas if you mess your picture up, you've messed that picture up. People don't really realize this necessarily, and it clicked with me a while ago, is, oh, I have to do this now. All of this, like you have to take an image, take a raw file, work on it, find the colors you want and everything else, and actually that is something that's worth investing a lot of time in because it's extremely hard, and there is no right or wrong answer with it. There's no right or wrong answers in the practice of photography either, really, but there are a few more rules. But post, you have almost infinite control, and that means you have almost infinite possibilities to really, really mess something up. And it's very often
And
that
you
you
can spend a lot of time
That's
doing
what
it.
I-
yeah, and you'll never know what's wrong.
And the funny thing about post too is that that's almost part of the problem of replacing the lighting thing, because I'll fix it in post. I'll just fix it in post. But if you were shooting film, you could dodge and burn with simple placement and flagging and doing all those things in camera, and that used to be done.
Right.
But now I'll just fix it in post.
There's a very good reason why photographers, on the whole, beyond a certain level of success, used to pay someone else to do that. A lot of them still do. It's because it demands a very, very different set of skills and an enormous amount of patience.
Well, and I think that's okay, right? That's
Yeah.
okay if it's not where you want to be and it's not where your expertise is, to be someone that outsources, because it's a hugely
That's why I
different
stopped
skill
taking
set.
pictures, honestly. Like I just realized I'm not getting any better at this, and I decided to start making movies instead. And I was getting better at that, but I knew when to call it quits at something that I was terrible at. And I used to sit forever editing a picture badly, and I'd forgotten, like my eyes, I started going like blind to it. I don't know what I'm looking at anymore. Like I can't remember what I wanted it to look like or what it started as. And it just, at that point, that's when I just go like this. And then I sent it to a friend like Pratik, who does something in
Pratik's fantastic.
4 minutes
Yeah.
that is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Fresh eyes. And we're all writers, and certainly I avoid editing my own work beyond a certain point because you can't see it clearly anymore. Every writer needs an editor. Every photographer
true.
needs fresh eyes on their stuff. If they're really going to, and obviously you can just buy VSCO filters like everyone else, why not? But if you don't go down that route, if you do it yourself, it's a very different set of skills.
Absolutely. Well, let's kind of move on to our we've been talking a lot about things that is advice for photographers, whether you're new or you're current. Let's kind of finish up with that topic of what is some additional advice that you have for photographers out there as the industry is getting more competitive, as it's harder to perhaps stand out. What are some things? We can start with you, Barney.
I'm just making a little note here, hang on. There we go. Storytelling was the note I made. We've talked a little bit about valuing your work. That's very important. I was a freelance photographer full-time for a very short spell because I was afraid to ask for money and therefore never got paid. I was always being told to get the next one. This one was just my portfolio. Don't do that. Do something that you really, really love, because if you don't, it shows. I think one of them, you can get surprised. One of the most fun shoots I ever had was shooting mirrors, which is technically extraordinarily difficult, and that's why it was really interesting. But on the whole, mirrors are very hard to take pictures of, by the way. You have to compose the picture backwards. You've got to put stuff behind you that's going to look good in the reflection of the mirror, and not get the camera in it. But on the whole, if you have a real passion for what it is you're taking pictures of, it shows, and it will also drive you through, because regardless of how burned out you are with the photography, if you still have a passion for the activity, then you're more likely to hang in there. Don't punch down, because very often it's people that get you jobs, not your portfolio. Shockingly, the more successful you become as anything, any professional field, you realize that it's referrals. So don't be nasty, and tell stories. It's really, really hard to become a successful professional photographer. A lot of professional photographers, in sheer money terms, are not successful, and that's always been true, and that's fine. But the ones who do really well, the ones whose names you know, are really good at storytelling. So find a story and follow that.
That's great advice. I mean, I think you hear a lot that it's people, they become known for their personal projects, and that those are the things that actually stand out to future people that are going to hire them, more so than any of the jobs that they've done for somebody else.
Or any particular image.
Yep, absolutely.
Something you mentioned, brought something up before I get to the point I was going to say, was if you work for free, make sure it's something that you love. Before I was a full-time writer and video maker, I worked in finance. I was in cubicle, and I didn't take a vacation for 4.5 years because every single time I got vacation, I would use it to make something beautiful. I would use it to work towards what I wanted to do, which was to make movies full time. And I didn't charge for any of these things because every time I did it, it was for a project I wanted to do. And I wanted to make something beautiful because I knew if I made something where my passion showed through in it, I could eventually use that to sell work later. And the one film that I made that did that was the one I made for the Thunderbirds, about one of their photographers who was in the jets taking pictures of other jets. That I was like madly passionate about making that film, and I think it came through in that video. And that's the one that eventually let me leave and do my own thing because I could use that to sell my work. But back on what I was actually originally going to say was a lot of people will tell you to specialize in something, like pick something you want to be good at. I think that the answer is somewhere in between specializing and diversifying. You don't want to be an animal, food, portrait, wedding, and architecture photographer. But you can be a video guy, food photographer, and architecture photographer because the concepts are the same. So you can try and find that middle ground and don't diversify too much, but be able to do multiple things, and I think you can be really successful at that. I think that's why a lot of wedding photographers can do portrait sessions too really well, because it's the same concepts, and they can broaden their market that way and not just shoot weddings and engagements.
Yeah.
I don't know, am I making this up? I'm not a wedding photographer. I'm looking at you because you are.
It sounds like it's logical.
Yeah, right?
It makes sense to me. So I would think, I mean, touching back on my whole thing is Tim Ferriss, if you ever read the 4-Hour Workweek, and I like that book a lot. There's a lot of things that I pick up from it. It's not like I'm a 4-Hour Workweek-aholic type person, but there's a lot of good key points in there. One of my favorite quotes was, if you want to be a world-class educator, first become a world-class learner. And I would flip that and say, if you want to be a world-class photographer, be a world-class learner. There's, you know, like if you guys compare what you're doing on a daily life, I'm doing about 100 shoots a year. That means every 3 days I'm doing something, basically. And most of them are client commissioned. When I'm not being client commissioned, I'm doing at least every other week, if not every week, a conceptual shoot for myself. We're doing education, we're doing all those things. And so if you kind of compare yourself and you say, hey, if I'm jumping into this, not only do you need that education, but you need to get out and do it. Because if someone else is putting in 100 shoots, 800 hours a year, and you're trying to catch up to this person who already has 15,000 hours in the industry, you got to be dumping in the time to do it. And so I love the fact that you guys mentioned if you're going to do a free shoot, do about something that you love. And I do the same thing. I do, I started shooting fitness. I even brought this up in our class. Like my very first fitness shoot ever, the whole class we taught, we taught about lighting and understanding lighting and how much you could do with just a simple on-camera flash. Hopefully, did you guys learn something? Yeah? All right. So I talk about, like, if you just understand the basics of lighting, you can approach any one of these areas. And I showed my first fitness shoots that we ever did. And Nautilus Stairmaster came and bought the images. They paid $10,000 for 7 images from a shoot that was just for me wanting to do it, basically. And then it opened up a whole new side. Now we do fitness, like commercial fitness work. And it was just doing something passionate about. I went and did a conceptual shoot with GMG Automotive, and now we're going back to do another one. We're hoping that we can get into Audi. So these things that like go out and do these shoots, don't go and work for free. There's a very big difference of working for free, right?
Well, don't give away your images. In terms of, don't let someone else take control of your images for nothing in return.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It'll haunt you forever.
But if you're smart about it and you create these strategic relationships with other people and you go create them images, they use those images in their marketing materials, but they leave your watermarks on it and it spreads. You can be extremely effective doing marketing basically for your business and branching into new areas by just doing conceptual shoots, which basically you're learning on this at the same time. So that's one of the biggest things is get out and shoot, and even if like you don't have a client, then find something you want to do and where you want to be, shoot what you're interested in, shoot what you want to be hired for, and go out and put together a conceptual shoot and do it.
I think it's really great advice. I think it's that balance between the importance of education, but then the importance of actually going out and doing something.
Yeah.
Because you can sit there and be educated over and over and over, but if you don't go do the thing, you're not going to actually learn it.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, for a new photographer starting out, just trying to break in, you're going to hopefully get some jobs that may not be all that exciting. I mean, hopefully you get jobs. Some of those jobs may not be all that exciting. You may be hired to photograph pens, and pens may not really be where may not be where your passion lies. But you have a real responsibility to bring your artistic eye to all that, regardless of whether you think it's mundane as a subject. Your client certainly doesn't, and a lot of these projects that may not seem all that exciting, bring something special to it. It becomes part of your portfolio. When you can really do that, and you get a lot of these smaller jobs, suddenly you start to have a very broad and very interesting body of work. And it really is the photographer's responsibility never to ever phone it in. Say, oh, this is a boring little job. I'm not getting paid that much for it. I'm just going to, shine it on. No, bring something special to it. Bring something unique.
Well, on that note too, I know so many. I feel like as a portrait photographer, being creative and finding the beauty in things, is so key as a photographer. And if you're dealing with people, one of the biggest things that we talk about in our studio is that the easiest way to get on my bad list and to get out of our company is to say anything negative about a client. And it's so easy to get in the mindset, oh yeah, she's just bridezilla, or oh man, did you see my bride today? She's not very attractive, or whatever it is. It's so easy to fall into that mindset as a photographer. And it's my biggest pet peeve, and it's the easiest way to get out, because I feel like if you can't see the beauty in somebody or in whatever it is that you're photographing, how in the world would you possibly bring it out in an image? What? So Jared Jonas, every time he's in town, I try and make a point to go see him, and he has the best quote ever. So I'm not even gonna try and put in my own terms. He just said, if you wanna be a better photographer, be a better person. And I felt like that was such a key thing for anybody that does portraiture. Be a good person and see the beauty in everybody, because that's what you're asked to basically show. And you'll find that when you do it, you literally can change lives. You show people a beauty that they don't see themselves, and they'll walk out of the room being a completely different person than when they came in.
I think that's great advice. I think we just have about 5 minutes or so left. This has been awesome, so I want to open it up for some questions. If anyone has any questions in here in their studio audience, there's a mic. You can grab one. That would be great. In the meantime, there are folks at home that have been asking some questions coming through. We have talked, one of the big questions was about whether today people who aren't yet known can make a living, and sort of what I've heard is education, practice, hustle are some of those themes. What do you guys think about film photography? This question had come through, is film photography making a comeback, and do you think we'll see sort of any innovations within that arena?
I just had my engagement session done entirely in film.
Why?
Because my photographer, who I love her work, her name's Lauren Jonas. You know Lauren.
Oh, I know her.
Yeah, her work is spectacular, and she shoots it in film. So I wanted her to shoot my engagement session like that, and that meant she was going to use film. And I still think it's beautiful. And I don't know if there's going to be new innovations made around it. I mean, it seems like as much as I hear people taking back up film, we hear about films that's no longer going to be made anymore, like it's getting discontinued. So I don't know if that's going to change anything, but I do like that people, I think you should learn film before shooting digital. I still think that's wildly important. Maybe not the zone system. I don't know if that's still necessary. Do you know the zone system?
Yeah,
yeah, it's absurd, but I think learning the process of shooting film and then the process of developing your own film, you should do at least once. I think that's a big deal. But I don't know if it's going to make a comeback for film.
I think you touched on the barrier is the materials. It's film stock and chemicals are like food. They go off, and they have to be made in large batches, and it's not economical to do that unless large numbers of people are buying it. It's unfortunate, but I think beyond large format, I suspect film will probably continue to die just because the numbers of people using it are too small. If you want to go out and buy it and shoot it and prove me wrong, that's brilliant, but I don't think there are enough people probably making that leap. I could be wrong.
I think film will hang out. I think it'll become a very boutique product.
I think so too. I think it's going to hang out, and I have a lot of friends that still shoot hybrid. That's one of the greatest ways to differentiate yourself. If that's part of your style and what you do and everything, how many people are shooting film versus how many people are shooting digital? So right off the bat, you've automatically separated yourself from 95% of the other photographers out there shooting it. Now, Does it fit in your style? Does it fit in what you do? I don't know. But I think there will always be that small market there for purchasing film and for buying those things. And I don't think that's going to leave necessarily.
I just hope they figure out how to make it in small enough batches that they can continue to make it.
That
is a
main
really
thing.
big concern.
I think so. I think we have another question in the studio audience.
If we decide to go with a mirrorless camera body, what's the availability for speed lights at this point?
Well, it's almost infinite, really, between third-party and legacy flash guns, because even if you have concerns about a very old flash gun giving a dangerous trigger wattage, you can still trigger it off camera. I mean, you can put anything, almost, really, as long as it's got a hot shoe, you'll find a ton of stuff to work with it. And you're not wasting film, right? So
Photix makes some really good stuff. I think that it'll work on just about anything with a hot shoe.
Is that how you pronounce it? I've been saying it wrong.
Photix?
Forever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Photix.
I always say Photix.
and just get yourself a Vivitar 283 from Goodwill. They're
I
fantastically
have the
versatile.
285 HVs.
I have one in the back of my truck, actually. I don't know why. I just
Why
do.
is it in the back?
You never know when you'll need one.
Yeah, right. I have a top.
You also never know
Well,
when
I
you'll
also have
need
a slider in the back of my truck. I've got a lot of weird things back there.
Well, let's take one more question. It looks like we have one in the studio audience. Go ahead.
Great panel, great discussion. It's, I guess, emphasizing the difference between chasing your passion and taking up photography as a way of hoping to bring about some change in following your passions, maybe from photographing something that we need to improve in our communities, or help bring about change or awareness. So storytelling is really important in that. But also share your thoughts as far as for those who are inspired to use photography as a hobby, and maybe communicate the importance of transitioning into a business as well as salesmanship. Can you speak on that for a little bit? I know I probably touched on a couple of points there, and
Yeah,
I apologize. So it's about photography
exactly sure
as a hobby.
what the question was.
Well, the question is as far as keeping photography important or viable in terms of chasing your passions and helping bring about changes in the community, and how can you do that as a hobby? But also for those who want to take the step further and say, okay, I'm not wanting to be a hobbyist anymore, I want to do this professionally. Can you speak on the importance of running it as a business and maybe focusing on the marketing and the salesmanship as a photographer as a skill set, and not just, hey, I have great gear? Because I think we touched on how important the gear is, but it's that, and Pi, you spoke to it beautifully as far as creating great experiences for our potential clients and the salesmanship behind that.
I can talk about the business side of it. I think from the helping the community and stuff, that's going to fall into where your passion in photography lies. My passion is in showing people kind of their beauty, if you will. I love portraiture. I love weddings, and I photographed my the closest thing that I have to a little sister just about a month ago. And she comes from a family where they don't, very typical Asian family. They don't praise each other. They don't talk about anything. Like, her self-image is not the way that I perceive her. And I took these photographs and showed them to her, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I look beautiful. I look like a woman." I'm like, "Yes, that you are. Like, this is what you are." So I think affecting change is a matter of choosing the area that you're passionate about and focusing in on that. And I think from the business side, there's really no other way to make the transition into being a professional photographer unless you do understand the business. And the thing is that me, Justin, and Chris, the partners of Lineage's Photography, we are former CPAs and accountants. We had nothing to do with this industry when we first, we're like Jaron, we worked for Ernst & Young. We were in our cubicles. That's what we did for 2 years. We became CPAs, and we said, we've had enough of that. Let's go become photographers. It was kind of a weird story. But anyway, we became photographers, and that was the business background that helped us to do what we do today. And so if you don't love business, I don't like business. That's where I rely on Justin and Chris, because they're incredible in that area. They're also incredible artists as well. And so I'm able to, we kind of segregate those duties of, I focus on pushing forward, like I'm kind of the mad scientist in terms of lighting and brand and what we're doing. And so I'll go create these different recipes, and I'll create these different things that we do from a post-production side, from a lighting side, from everything. I'll give it to Justin and Chris, and just like they would on a, if we were a franchise restaurant, they would take what this chef does and they would say, okay, we're going to incorporate this, we're going to take that out, we're going to do this, and they build it into the business of what we do. So they allow me to focus on the areas that I'm most passionate about. And if your passion is not business, then find some good business partners, because otherwise there's no way to really step into the industry.
The guy who did Humans of New York is another example of how he followed his passion and now he's doing something that in his day-to-day. So like if you want to see someone who loves just people and taking pictures of people and hearing their stories, and he's managed, I'm pretty sure he's making money on it now. Like he's sent places to tell the stories of other people. And he raises money for people he cares about. So he's doing both of those things. He's a hobbyist who's doing what he loves, and it's also a business. And he built it slowly over time.
Using social media.
Using social media and just continually doing what he loved repeatedly well.
And and also the other thing is, which is hardest to capture, having a really good idea, so obvious that every other photographer in the world has been kicking themselves ever since.
That's the funny thing about passion. I feel like when I know we're a little bit over time, but when in raising my kids, I feel like the one thing that I want them to understand is that money is a byproduct of passion. If you do what you're passionate about, the money is always going to come. But if you don't pick what you're passionate about, it's more than likely you're never going to become successful enough to actually make the kind of lifestyle you're going to want to lead.
I would say be a good person as well. Talk to people, make friends. That's how you get jobs.
Communicate.
Yep. Communicate and network.
Wait, you said don't punch down. I never heard
Don't
that
punch
before.
down. Yeah, don't be nasty to people underneath you because you will meet them when you
that's what
end
that
up.
means.
Yeah, because I was like,
Yeah,
wow, waiting
when
for him
you're
to
coming
explain
up,
that. And he said,
you'll
don't
meet
punch
them
down.
again when you're coming down. So
so
don't
cool.
punch down.
This is what I'm saying. If I had your accent,
It sounds
so much more
Oh,
legitimate.
the accent. Well, thank you all so much. This has truly been our pleasure to have all of you here talking about not just the gear, but truly the passions, the business, and what it takes to move forward.